I look that big.
You look
I'm
big.
advertising a message.
Well, okay, well now we're on, so you. Okay.
I forget the name of that company that makes all that good bread.
Okay.
Rye bread and pumpernickel.
Okay, now I'm going to start this. Okay, now let's talk about your childhood. You were born in 1932 during the Depression, and Grandpa, did he have a hardware store? Do you know when did that hardware store start?
Well, he was in that business from 1939 until 1975, the same location, and then he sold it.
Okay.
But before that, my understanding is in order to get the money to buy the property, he drove a cab. I never heard about that until we were talking about how do you get the money to buy a property. And that's what I believe Grandmom said.
Mm-hmm.
And she believed in buying it right away, and also buying a house right away, not renting. And with the property, Grandmom, actually they were 3 little stores made into one store, and it was on a place called Ludlow Street. That was just, I think it was south or north, I don't remember, of the main street going into 69th Street.
Right, it was south of Market Street.
Right south of Market Street. Thank you, my dear.
I remember that store well.
Okay. It was in between Hannigan's Bar and McDevitt's hardware store. But they came to Herman. He was known as Herman's Repair Shop. He could repair anything. And the motto was, if Herman can't repair it, you just can't get it done. He could do anything. He was an expert locksmith, and he was an expert electrician. And I do remember that because he did things for me when I moved into a house, and that was after Ray died. He could do anything. Otherwise, Ray was also very handy, and the kids used to watch him, and they usually watched a guy that would fix the air conditioner or the dishwasher to learn what to do.
Well, let's talk about the store.
Was,
Okay.
was he self-taught, Grandpa?
What?
Was Grandpa self-taught, and how did he know how to do all that stuff?
I don't know, but he just knew everything. And he was my father was an expert locksmith, and he had 5 employees. One of them was known as Oliver Keating. Everybody called him Ollie. He was a good friend of my brother-in-law, but that's another story.
Well, now, so you're saying that he got the hardware store in 1939?
Yes,
Okay, when you were 8, and up to then, you think he was driving a cab?
that's what I was told, but I really don't remember
Okay.
anything about that.
All right, now what I'm curious about, if you can shed some light on this, that was during the Depression. My father talked very much about being very poor during the Depression. My mother never did talk about being poor. I get the impression that she wasn't too poor. So can you give me any idea how Grandpa managed?
I don't know. All I know is we never suffered anything. And especially me, I was treated like an only child because of the 10.5 years difference between my sister and me. And I had everything I wanted, only I didn't ask for anything, only my mother insisted when I was 13 years old. I really did not want it. She wanted me to have a mouton lamb coat. This was very special, so I obeyed my parents. In those days, you did everything they told you to, or at least I did. And I had a hat and a muff and a what do you call it, coat, a mouton lamb, dark brown, very nice. But when I got married, I had the most gorgeous coat. I had a black Persian lamb with ranch mink cuffs. It was gorgeous, and I picked that one out. Anyway, what shall we get back to?
Well, okay, so you don't remember much about Grandpa driving a cab?
No,
Did
not
you
at
remember
all.
him getting the hardware store?
No, not, I was very young then,
Right.
but I do remember going there after school, especially I was 11 years old, and I was taking singing lessons. And then I would go back to my father's store and go home with him. But the singing lessons were very interesting because I was learned how to sing better from a lady by the name of Elsie McDonald. She happened to be Jeanette McDonald's sister.
Wow.
And there's another sister who plays on the Addams Family. She goes by the name of Blanche Rock. And these were big times because Jeanette McDonald was a movie star and she sang, oh, she was glorious voice, and she sang with Nelson Eddy.
So even at the time, so they must have had money. They were paying for singing lessons, and you went down the shore every summer,
Yes.
and
Well,
they bought you.
Went down the shore every summer with my mother. My father kept the store open 6 days a week, and his only real love was getting a new car. He loved to drive. And they threw away the mold when they made my father, because on Sunday morning he would bring breakfast up to my mother, and he called my mother Sonny. He was the only one that called her Sonny, even though her real name was Sally, but her Hebrew name was Sarah. But he called her Sonny. And after he gave her breakfast in bed, then they would go out in a new car. Every 2 years, he had the same car. It was always a Cadillac. He loved to drive. He didn't smoke. He didn't drink, except when he came home from work, he would have a little schnapps, this big, and that was the extent of his drinking, unless he was at a bar mitzvah or a wedding. Then he would have a little something.
I remember him smoking cigars.
Well, that was only, I think, like a present. It wasn't a regular thing.
Okay.
He never smoked as a regular item, as a regular
Okay.
thing to do. And I want to tell you, if my husband had smoked, I never would have married him, because I don't remember anybody in my house except for my father occasionally smoking. And I think it's a terrible habit, but then that's me. So what else can I tell you about my wonderful life? And has been a wonderful life.
Yeah. Well, it sounds.
And I hope it continues for many, 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 many years.
Oh yeah. Well, we'll be partying for a long time.
Yes. I think the number 100 is a very beautiful number. And I would like very much to see that number or live that number, because I have a friend who sits next to me, for lunch and for dinner. She's 103 years old, and her good friend recently passed away. She was 107. So who knows? It might be in our genes, not the kind I wear occasionally, but the kind that's in my head.
Yeah, well, Grandpa lived to 95, and a lot of people are
That's
living
right.
way into their 90s and even 100s these days.
That's right. All the good vitamins and all that good stuff.
Right. Now, what do you remember about World War II?
Well, I remember, well, I was young, but I remember when I was 11 years old, I was down the shore, Atlantic City, that area, and there were soldiers on the boardwalk, and I just remember looking at them and I still think to this day, I am so happy that I was not born a boy, because I think war has got to be the worst. It has to be hell if you go to war. But I'd rather go through natural childbirth, which I've done, and I'd do it many more times, rather than have to go to war. And I remember natural childbirth is what I wanted, but the doctor I went to said, if you want natural childbirth, I'm not your doctor. But I wanted it anyway, so everything worked out great. Because now I can tell you, I not only had 2 boys first, I wished hard enough for a girl, and God gave me 2 identical girls. I was deliriously happy, and I still am, because my little girls are so good to me. They live not too far from me, maybe 3/4 of an hour, but the only reason I'm up here in this area, which is known as Bethlehem instead of Philadelphia, is because I kept falling, and my daughter said, we can't keep coming down, Mom. It's almost an hour away. So lo and behold, I'm up here, and I live in an independent living facility, which is the best one because it's written up and people are on a waiting list. As soon as somebody moves out, somebody else moves in. And I went through a lot of the places and finally realized this has got to be the best. And it is.
Well, I'm glad you're happy here. Now, could we get back to some history here? Do you remember finding out that Pearl Harbor was bombed? And
Oh, certainly.
how did you find out about it?
Everybody knew about it. They talked about it. It was on the radio. It was horrendous.
Okay.
And yet, today, it's interesting how we've made friends, and a lot of people are married to Japanese people, and German people as well, because we have a girl who came from Germany. She sits with us, well, not at my table. I say my table because we have the best table. Everybody wants to get in. We have the best group of girls. It's set for about 5 or 6, and we usually try to squeeze somebody in that really wants to get in. 7, and once we made it 8, but 8 is no more allowed at all. It's too much.
Okay. Well, now we're trying to learn something about history, if possible.
Okay.
What else do you remember about World War II? Can you specifically remember the first time you heard about the bombing of Pearl Harbor? Can you remember somebody telling you or hearing it on the radio?
I probably heard it on the radio,
Okay.
and everybody talked about it, and we just couldn't believe that anybody would do that. Why would they do that? Why would they want to make war? Who who knows? We're still fighting today. At some place, there are always fighting going on.
Mhm. Yes. Now, do you remember anything? For example, do you remember hearing about D-Day, the Americans and British landing in France in 1944?
Well, not particularly, but I do remember during World War II, my mother and father's very good friends, they had 2 girls and a boy, and the boy was in the service. And unfortunately, he died, and his mother, Mrs. Efterman, was not the same after that.
Oh,
No, it was terrible to think about it. And I get very emotional when I think about these terrible things. And I'm very fortunate that my husband was in the Korean War, but that's after the Vietnam War. So Laurie can ask me better questions, better than I can think of them.
yeah. Well, actually,
I'm sure.
the Korean War was way before the Vietnam War.
Oh, I thought it was afterwards.
Oh, no.
Okay.
No, he was, as I understand it, Ray didn't go to Korea.
No, he was
in
very
Japan.
fortunate.
Yes, he lucked out.
He did, he absolutely did.
And, I
And he
remember-
wanted to go back to Japan because it was such a beautiful country. But I was thrilled that he was only in for 2 years, but they wanted him to remain in because he had above average intelligence, I felt, and they wanted him to remain in and he'd be an officer, but he wanted to get out and get married, and we were married 2 months later because I knew we were going to get married, so I had everything prepared, and I knew him for a funny way we met, but that's another story. Anyway, Larry happens to be the son of my brother-in-law, and if it wasn't for my father, nobody would have met anybody else in the family. It's very interesting
that's
tale.
Yeah. Well, now, what was the funny way you met Ray?
Well, Lee Levin was a nephew, I believe it is, of your father. I think he was a nephew or a cousin. I don't recall.
Okay. Well.
Well, anyway, my father needed a part for a gas range, and he went to somebody that everybody called Uncle Dave for the part. And he got the part, and Uncle Dave said, "By the way, Herman, do you know a nice Jewish girl? My nephew just came home from World War II." Well, my father's eyes lit up. My sister was a big, fat, 23 years old. Not fat, just beautiful. And
in other words, for those times.
Yes.
He was worried about, he wanted to marry her off.
well, of course. So Sid, that's Larry's father, said, okay, he'll take her out. He called her, and of course women would not be available the first date. You had to keep them waiting a little bit. So I entertained him. I was downstairs, and Sid said, well, how old are you? I told him I'm 13. He said, well, you're a big girl and you're nicely shaped, but you can't tell anybody in my family because I have a nephew that I think would like to meet you very much. You cannot tell him you're only 13 because he goes to Central High School, which is, at that time, it was an all-boys school for those that were a little bit, I can't say smarter, but not everybody was accepted. So Lee and his best friend Ray went to Central. The rest of the guys went to Overbrook, which is still a pretty good high school. Anyway, to get back to whatever I was saying, what was I saying?
You were explaining how you met Ray.
Oh, yes. Anyway, so Sid says to me, what do you like to do? I said, well, I love poetry. I love to read poems. He said, tell me one. And I not only told him one, I did it with everything that you're supposed to do. I said, the village blacksmith, under the spreading chestnut tree, the village smithy stands. The smith a mighty man is he, with large and sinewy hands, and the muscles on his arms are strong like iron bands. Well, now that I think of it, I realize how stupid I must have looked. But I love to do that, and I love to do acting. So I incorporated both, I guess, at that time. Anyway, so when my sister came down, as I was told, your father, Sid, asked my sister to marry him the very first night. I could be wrong, but it worked out beautifully. There were 4 children from that, 2 boys and 2 girls. My niece was named Deborah Lynn. My next one was a boy sitting next to me, Lawrence. I don't know your middle name, but do you have one?
Howard.
Howard?
Rhymes with coward.
Howard.
But what the heck?
Okay. And then there was a little lapse, and then became Yvonne. I don't know her middle name either.
Bell. Yvonne Bell.
Yvonne Bell.
Vonnie.
Vonnie. We always called her Vonnie. And then came, last but not least, Mac, like the truck, M-A-C-K.
Right.
And that was the 4 children there. So,
Okay.
what do we have now?
Well, I'm still curious. Maybe you remember.
How I Met Ray?
Well,
How I Met Ray.
I'm still back in the 40s.
Okay.
Can you tell me anything about? Do you remember anything about VE Day, Victory in Europe, or VJ Day, Victory over Japan, or about the atomic bombs that were dropped on Japan?
Oh, the atomic bombs. We were flabbergasted that that was done, but it had to be done, I guess. But no, I really don't remember too much of that. But I do know, of course, how it happened, and I read about it, and I always read, speaking of reading, when we got the Inquirer, a newspaper in Philadelphia, I always read it from, I don't know why it was ingrained in me, I read it from right to left, which is how the Hebrew books are done.
Mm-hmm.
And I always read the comics first. After looking at the front page headlines, I read the comics, and if you turned the page over, you had the what month you were born, all that for the day. Each day it was different.
The horoscope.
The horoscope, thank you. That noise, that voice, beautiful voice coming from the distance is my older twin, by 25 minutes older than her sister. Her name is Lisa Carroll. And my younger one, 25 minutes younger, is Linda Ellen. And their last name is Schwartz, Schwartz. Wartz. And the reason I met him, he was a good friend of Leroy, also known as Lee Levin. And they were very good friends. And I was going out. We went out, we were very young, and we went out as just, like friends. And a bunch of people would sometimes go together. And Lee's mother said, "You've stopped taking this girl out. You're getting too serious. You're too young." So when Ray heard that, he said, "I've been wanting to take her out, and now I can." So I was 15 at that age, 2 years later. And Ray said to Lee, "I'm going to take her out now. I've been wanting to." So from the time I was 15, I dated what was going to then be my husband. So from 15 to 21, almost 22, I went out with my husband. We got married 2 months after he was discharged from the Marines, and everything was wonderful until he didn't feel well one day, stayed home from work, and didn't realize, well, they gave all the executives, and Ray was the lawyer, and he worked for Levitt the builder, and they examined everybody, but they don't examine the brain. And as things had to be, he went into the hospital, and they found he had a brain abscess 7 centimeters deep. So that's how come I lost my husband. But I took very good care of my 4 children. I worked part-time, and I worked at a job I hated, but I needed it because I needed the benefits for my children. And then when I had an opportunity to become a property manager, I just loved it. I was in 7th heaven. I could talk to people, and I showed them the apartment, whereas when you're sitting at a desk and you have to do payroll and accounting type, you can't talk, and you just have to be still, and that's not for me. I like to talk, as if you can tell, but that's me.
Yeah. Well, that was Ray's death was the worst tragedy that ever happened in our family.
Yes.
The only one that I know of during my lifetime where a parent died with young children. And Ray was a great guy. I remember him helping me build a crystal radio set.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's great.
Yep, I think you were there that time.
Could be.
Imagine it was in 1961, so you probably don't remember it.
No.
Okay, so let's see. What else do you remember about U.S. or world history from, say, the 40s or 50s?
Not too much. I'm not really great in history.
Okay, that's fair. Oh, do you remember when you moved into Hoffman Avenue?
Oh yes, we had a wonderful house there. Hoffman Avenue was only 2 blocks long, but the block I lived on, at the end of the block started Cobb's Creek Parkway. And if you went out around the parkway, in the parkway, part way down, there was an opening that took you to Yaden, with another area a little area,
Yep,
and that was would take you right down, actually to where, almost to where my father's store was.
yep, I've passed that way many times.
Yes.
And I do sometimes go that way now, down Cobbs Creek Parkway to Hoffman Avenue to see the old house. Now, but do you remember?
Oh.
You remember moving into it?
I do, because we lived on Warrington Avenue, which is also not far from Hoffman Avenue.
Yep.
And I only lived there for, I think, a year or so.
Okay. You
And
don't,
then when they moved into Hoffman Avenue, that was a beautiful house. It looked like a twin, but it was actually a row house. The reason it looked like a twin, there was an opening between the right side and the left side where two families lived. And I remember our house in particular, we had a back stairway that led off of from the kitchen, and at the top of the steps, the second floor, there was a little telephone table, and I could bring that telephone into the back bedroom where I lived, and I talked for hours to my best friend Betty Cohen.
I'll bet you did.
I did indeed. And there were two middle rooms connecting. My sister and brother-in-law, Sid and Bee, lived there in one, and the babies lived in the next room. They connected. And my parents, of course, Sally and Herman, had the front bedroom.
Yes, I lived there for over 2 years, the first 2 years of my life. And I have some memories of it.
Good.
Do you have an idea what year you moved into it?
I'm trying to think. We only lived for 1 year on Warrington Avenue. So, not really, but I was young. I don't remember exactly.
Okay.
I should have written all this down like
That's
you're
okay.
doing now. That's a good thing to do.
Yeah, okay.
Do you have
You
memories?
don't remember where on Warrington Avenue you lived, do you?
50,
What hundred?
they were all 58s, hundreds.
Well, you know, I have a customer at 5820 Warrington Avenue that I do some work at her house occasionally.
Oh, good.
Like Herman.
Yeah. Well, they said, if Herman can't fix it, nobody can.
That's right.
But he also not only had the hardware store, and he was 2 levels and 5 employees, 1, 2, 3, 4. I think it was 5 employees. But I do remember him giving my mother $10 every night, which she kept under her mirror on the bureau, in case he couldn't meet the payroll. So she did that, and I guess there were many times when he needed it. I don't know that part. But I do know the house was wonderful. It even had a fireplace in the living room. And when you came into a, you can't call it a sun parlor. It was a porch, I guess, an enclosed porch. Then it was a living room, and with 1 set of steps there. Then it was a dining room. Then it was a dinette, and then it was a kitchen. And if you went out the back door, you first saw a place where you could store your canned goods and all those goodies. And it had a garage, and it was a very good-looking, wonderful house. I mean, I thought it was terrific, because I do hear of other people that I eat lunch with whose parent died, and the mother had to go out to work. And I was fortunate. When Ray died, he did give the insurance that they give to the service person after he's discharged. And that went to his mother with a stipulation that she would never get it all in one time, because like Ray said, she would go through it like immediately. So he stipulated that it be given to her, I guess it was every month. I'm not 100% sure. But Ray was an only child. An only child being a boy, you have to do for your mother the right way if you're a good son. And he was a very good son. That I can attest to.
Yes, I remember meeting
Bessie.
Bessie, yes. And I remember him picking her up. And I think I went with him to pick her up once on Baltimore Avenue.
Uh-huh. Well, I do remember her because we moved to Long Island, excuse me, not too shortly, too much before Ray died. And we had a house that was built by Levitt the builder. Ray worked for him, of course. And it had one garage, so we were building another garage attached to the one, so that my mother-in-law could live there, and if she wanted to cook, she could. Be by herself, she could. Or she could come into the kitchen and eat with us and be with us. Well, as it turned out, she didn't want to be with us in Long Island anyway. She didn't have many friends. She didn't make many friends. And I assumed, of course, that it was because there were no people up there that she would be friendly with. So she one day said to Ray, I don't want to live here anymore. I want to go to Philadelphia. Okay. He took her to Philadelphia, took a day off from work, drove her to Philadelphia, and drove back home. And it was about a week or two later, I don't remember the exact time. I don't like it here. I want to go to Atlantic City. Okay. Ray took off a day from work, and he drove her to Atlantic City and back, and there she loved it. She liked the air, and she liked to walk the boards, and she was a very, very pretty woman, very pretty. Even as she got older, I remember her at my wedding, and she was very beautiful. She reminded me of Vivian Lee. Anyway, what else shall I tell you?
Well, okay. Anything else you would like to add?
You want me to talk about my wonderful kids?
Oh, okay.
Well, I told you, I did mention it before, I'm not sure. After 2 boys, I was lucky enough, after wishing for a girl, I got identical twin girls. And the older one's name is Lisa Carol, and the younger one is Linda Ellen. So I was thrilled to pieces. Loved it.
You know, I didn't know their middle names until now.
Well, okay, now you know. I didn't know yours either. You said Howard?
That's right.
Uh-huh. Well,
Did Mac have a middle name?
yes.
Jeffrey. Mac Jeffrey.
I didn't know Mac's middle name either.
We never used it very much.
Anyway, my Richard is Richard Eric, and Rob is Rob Aaron. That's obviously Robert Aaron. Aaron being for my mother's father.
It wasn't Andrew?
No.
Yeah.
What?
I thought Rob's middle name was Andrew. You always said it was Robert Andrew.
Well, what did I say? Robert Aaron. Aaron, I thought it was. You could be right. I don't remember for sure. But I can ask Rob. He'd remember. Speaking of Rob, did you ever hear this story? Which is truly a story. He went to kindergarten, and he was born September 10th, And he was, at that point, he went to nursery school. He was 4.5. And the teacher said, he never talks to anybody. He doesn't talk. I think you should have him examined by a psychologist. So we had him examined, and the psychologist said, well, socially, he's his right age, 4.5, but intelligence-wise, he's 7 years old. Okay. He went back to school, and the teacher said, I don't know what happened to him, but he doesn't stop talking. So we all laughed about that, but he still doesn't talk that much, and he's got a wry sense of humor. But Richard, on the other hand, he can talk about anything, and he loves to talk, and he has a sense of humor like you couldn't believe. And he can imitate a lot of people with their voices. So they're two opposites, but they get along very well. I'm happy to report that. What else would you like, my dear?
Well, anything else?
Yeah, I didn't.
Now remember, this is something that we're likely to keep in the family for hundreds or thousands of years, so that your offspring and so that your descendants will know a little something about their matriarch. So
Right.
you can say anything you like, anything interesting, anything having to do with family history or world or national, or for that matter local history. So it's up to you.
Well, I just wanted to remind everybody that I love to tell jokes. I have a good sense of humor, and they call me the jokester, not the joker. That is a different person. Anyway, I love comedy, and my favorite movies would be either comedy, like Some Like It Hot, which is a wonderful comedy,
Great movie.
or a musical, but especially comedies. And to tell a joke, you always leave them laughing. And I have a good friend who calls me every night, and he tells me the jokes that I then repeat to other people. And sometimes they say, that's not so wonderful, or forget it. And I say, listen, I'm only the messenger. I don't make them up. Now, what else can I tell you all? And you all?
Well, okay.
And I forgot to tell you, Aunt Mary's husband was Cowman. Her name was Cowman Kessler after she got married.
Yes, I remember Calvin.
And he drove a truck that delivered sugar and flour during the World War II, when I believe it was rationed. If I'm not mistaken, it was
Okay.
rationed. So I guess some things, very few things, but some things came out of the war because they became a little more, having a little more money. And by the way, when they saw my Aunt Mary and my Aunt Annie, or Anne, people would say, here come the Sanet sisters. They were gorgeous, and they bought clothes that were stunning, and people admired them. And I remember hearing that, here come the Sanet sisters,
Okay.
Mary and Annie.
You've seen a lot of changes in your 91 years in the world. Crazy amount of changes.
Well, I remember,
do you,
I remember,
inventions, new inventions, and
that's right.
I mean, do you remember getting TV and then color TV?
Oh,
and
yes.
Cars.
I was 11 years old when we got our first television set, because Larry's father owned a store on Woodland Avenue, known as
Woodland Gas Range.
Woodland Gas Range, but they had other things besides gas ranges. In fact, Sid was in, had a brother named Al, and Al took care of the moving and storage part of the business, whereas Sid took care of the retail, selling anything there. But they also had two buildings, or not buildings, but stores. If you left one store with all the appliances and you went in the back way, with a little tiny opening there, like a little bit of a street, then became the next building or store that had all the furniture. And it was very nice, and it was very, very good looking, let's put it that way. And Woodland Avenue is a very good area for shopping, absolutely. And let's see, my Aunt Bertie's last name was Skolnick, and her husband's name was Jack. Her name was Aunt Bertie, we called her. And then Aunt Mary's husband's name was Cowman, with a K. And I'm trying to think what they did. I don't remember off the top of my head. I do remember, as I said before, that Ann's husband, Alexander J. Brill, had a haberdashery on South Broad Street near City Hall. Now, what did, well, I did tell you that he drove a truck. Yes, Mary's husband, Cowman, drove a truck. He delivered sugar and flour in large quantities, I'm sure, to bakers and maybe, regular people that needed those large amounts. And that was during World War II. So apparently, even though it was rationed, they made money that way.
Yeah, okay, so do you remember anything else about rationing?
Yes, you had to use stamps, ration a certain amount of stamps. Excuse me.
Do you remember not having things that you wished you had?
I never had anything that I couldn't have if I wanted it.
Okay.
I don't think I was spoiled because I never asked for anything out of the ordinary. Only, I guess I was very happy because my mother treated me very well. My father too, but he was always at work most of the time. But I always went for a ride with them one Sunday because I was much younger. My sister did not accompany us that way at all because of the big difference in our age. The only great thing I remember about my sister is that she took me to the movies in Center City. There was a theater called the Boyd, B-O-Y-D, and it was the picture that I loved so much. Oh God, what's the name? With the Tin Man and
With the Wizard of Oz.
The Wizard of Oz, that's it. And I love that movie. I've seen it about 4 or 5 times after that original one, with Judy Garland, and it was Buddy Epson played the Straw Man, and it was Jack Haley who played the Tin Man, and Bert Lahr played the Cowardly Lion. and they were fantastic. And then Frank Morgan played the wizard. I believe it was Frank Morgan. There was another Ralph Morgan at the same time, but I believe it was Frank Morgan.
Okay.
But, excuse me, Linda wants to know how long you plan to stay.
Well,
How much longer?
okay. Well, I think we're coming to the end here.
She has,
If-
I know there are lots more
Hmm?
stories that I've heard, but I don't know, you know.
Yeah. Well, what would you like to do, Aunt Edith? Do you want to?
Whatever you tell me to, dear.
Well, this is, it's up to you. If you have anything else you would like to talk about it, maybe we should take a little break first.
We can do that, or I can tell you about my wedding that I love so much.
Okay, go
And
ahead. What year was it?
1954. 1954, I was married at the Park Sheraton Hotel, and my rabbi lived next door to us on Drexel Road, and he was the officiating rabbi. And it was just a wonderful time. I stayed at the Bellevue Stratford Hotel, a fancy hotel, excuse me, in Philadelphia for our wedding night. And the next day we left for Florida for our honeymoon. And I was there for a week, and that was it.
I thought you went to Niagara Falls.
No, I went to Niagara Falls another time.
Okay.
No, for
Okay.
my wedding, we went to Florida,
Was this in the wintertime?
March 28th.
Okay.
So, but I happen to have had a beautiful, wonderful, sunny day on that particular day, like it was meant to be. And by the way, I always drove, if you're interested, when I drove, it was always a GM car. And I never drove anything else. The only time I did that for a short time was when I worked in Center City, and I bought a Toyota because it would save on gas, and I always felt like a traitor that I didn't buy American. But that's okay.
I mean, you drove Grandpa's truck when you worked in
Oh,
the store,
yes.
right? And that's why you didn't go to college and study. I
That's
remember
right.
you saying,
My
you know,
father,
just-
and I think it should be like that with all parents, he just thought I could do anything. So the day I was 16, he said, let's go, you learn to drive. And where did we learn to drive? In traffic. He said, well, you're going to be driving in traffic. So I learned to drive in traffic, and I learned to drive with a gear shift like they had then most of the time. And I love to drive. And I drove the truck, that we had two trucks. I drove one 8 o'clock in the morning sometimes to open the store where I worked, of course. So it was very beneficial for me to learn that way. And of course now everything, well, you can still get gear shift, but that would be silly if you can get it for a little more money to get an automatic rather than have to worry about a gear shift. But I guess a lot of trucks still have them. I used to love to drive, always. I took after my father, and he did let me have, and I felt like such a big deal. He wanted me to have a Cadillac to drive. I was taking my son, Richard, and I forget the other boy. But well, I know I was pregnant with Rob. And I don't recall if there was another boy. I believe must have been Mac. We were going to go to Center City at Christmas time to see all the windows in the department stores. So that's why Grandpa wanted me to have a very safe car. And indeed it was safe and beautiful, and I felt like such a big deal. Boy, I'm driving a Cadillac. Anyway, so that was the story. But I always drove GM cars after that. I just liked them better.
Okay, I remember Ray had a Ford, maybe a Fairlane.
Well, he was not a poor boy, but he couldn't afford a car.
Well,
so I do remember.
This was when you were married.
Oh, well, maybe when you were married. But before we were married, I remember him not having a car, and the trolley, it was actually a trolley that left every hour, and if you missed the one, you got to wait an hour, and that's the reason why I love John Pierce. He sang the Bluebird of Happiness regularly, and I just love to hear his voice. And I actually have a book with his life, talking about his life.
Well, what does that have to do with the trolley?
Well, just mentioned about Daddy not having a car and having to take the trolley.
Yeah, I remember I was born in 1951, so I don't remember much about Ray before you were married.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right, and by the way, I have pictures of you and Debbie. She was a little flower girl, I guess you would call it, and you were the ring bearer. I have pictures, I'll show you.
Okay, I think I've seen those pictures.
Yeah.
Now, electric bikes, well, now electric cars are a thing, and e-bikes are a big thing now, but you said that Grandpa actually had the first
That reminds me.
road bike in his shop, the E-Whizzer.
That's right. My little daughter, my older daughter rather, by 25 minutes, reminded me that my father installed something called a whizzer. It was the first thing that became an electric bike. You put it in between the bars on a boy's bicycle. And he also was a dealer for Schwinn bicycles and Lionel trains. So he had parts for all that. That's why he could repair anything. People brought him everything. And the lower level of our store is where we had an employee named Bill, and he did the welding and the grinding and everything else like that, and repaired the things down there that needed that type of repairs. And then we had another man, and we had James, and we had Booker, and Booker's nephew worked for us, but I forget his name. And they did the repairs. On those days, you repaired appliances, but today you just get rid of them and get new ones. But absolutely, we repaired toasters and vacuum cleaners and anything else you could name. And we had a little supply of paint. We didn't have like the 4,000 colors like they have now at Lowe's or the other big one. But Ace carries a lot also. That's a good hardware store that I hear from the ads on TV. But I also remember all our hardware was in the front of the store. all kinds of hardware, and especially my father could drill holes in anything that you wanted to make into a lamp. So we carried a lot of parts to make lamps, the bases and everything else you could think of that required making a lamp. And I loved to sell. I hated doing any of the paperwork in the back. I'd answer the phone and write down if somebody needed us to come out to their home. That would do. Somebody would do it. The only one that actually, I started to say this before, but we had the one employee who went out with a truck to people's homes. His name was Oliver Keating. Everybody called him Ollie, and he was a good friend of my brother-in-law, Sid. That's how he got the job. And he was the only one there, and it just so happened he was the only white man. The others were all dark-skinned, and unfortunately, Booker died, and we went to his funeral, and it was the first time I was ever at anybody's funeral, so it was hard, especially if you knew them well. And they worked for my father for years. They loved their jobs, and my father was a very good person. He gave to everybody what he felt. And I miss him dearly, believe me, especially my mother. She was the opposite of my mother-in-law. She was just so wonderful.
Do you remember any particular elections or like the climate? I mean, it's so divisive now, and there's so much. But you lived through so many different.
I remember voting for Dilworth. Yes.
That was the mayor of Philadelphia.
I didn't hear what you said.
Dilworth.
Dilworth,
Okay.
he was.
Okay.
Richardson Dilworth.
Yeah.
Richardson Dilworth, that's right. And I usually voted Democratic rather than Republican, because I think the Republicans are the ones with the big money, and they do whatever they want with the big money. Now, maybe anybody that gets into office gets a little corrupted after a while, but I firmly believe that the Democrats are much better than the Republicans.
Well, I think the Republican Party today is not the Republican Party, that used to be, and it's
Absolutely.
yeah.
We know, and as far as I know, now that Trump, well, I think the only Trump we should know is if you're playing bridge, then you can have Trump.
Yeah. Right.
By the way, I always played, if you're still interested in me, I always used to love to play mahjong and canasta. Canasta is a card game, and you have to have a partner. And with mahjong, you can play with 3 people, but it's better to play with 4, and sometimes 5. The 5th person just takes a turn and gives the other 4th person a chance to sit down and do whatever they want to do. But I remember that in Philadelphia, we always had such a great time, and we would take a turn hosting, and put out some goodies. If we had a house or apartment big enough, we did all that. We were happy to do it. We had the same circle of friends, and they all played the same thing. And even though I'm living here in Bethlehem, I still keep in contact with some of my friends that I played with, especially Nisa, Neysa, which means miracle in Hebrew. And I like Nisa very much. She was my favorite friend. And speaking of favorite friends, my best friend, Betty Cohen, she unfortunately died at 51, and I had introduced her to Ray's very good friend, who was actually his best man at our wedding. His name was Norman Tecker, Tecker. And, well, Betty died, but before she died, she always told Norman that, because Ray had already died, that she would like him to be with me. So we became a couple for a while, and I just thought I'd interject that now while I think of it.
I definitely remember Norman
Yeah,
and Betty.
yes. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, let's take a break now and start again if you'd like to. Okay.
Whatever you say, dear, you're the boss.
Okay. Oh.
Linda wanted to know how long. I think she's tired of running around, but
Who's
Mama,
tired of running around?
Linda, because she wanted to know how. Yeah, so I
Yes,
think
I-
that she's not going to come. But
Yes,
I'm getting the sense that I think Larry would like to know like more
Well,
historical. I mean, these are all
that's-
interesting
that-
anecdotes, but